Now, let's transition to the Buffalo Bills mock draft that was conducted ProFootballNetwork.com. Obviously, for the Buffalo Bills, they have to be excited about the new overtime rule changes potentially in the postseason here. The departure of Brian Daboll is a big storyline for them in the offense. What will it look like under Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen? Can they maintain some of that similar continuity there? Well, in terms of being able to do that, you want to be able to kind of bolster the offensive line, continue to build there. And at round one, pick number 25, you have them taking Zion Johnson, guard out of Boston College. What type of fit might you see here with Josh Allen and this Ken Dorsey-led offense?
Yeah, and I think an interesting caveat here. When the mock was originally written, Ryan Bates, their offensive lineman, he was originally signed with the Bears, but now recently it came out that the Bills were able to match his offer, so he maybe head back to the Bills. So that is an important need filled for the Bills, and it gives them a little bit of flexibility. I still think you could warrant taking Zion Johnson here because Zion Johnson, in my opinion, is the best interior offensive lineman in the class. I mean, you look at his Senior Bowl performance. This is a guy. One thing I really love, I think I touched on it yesterday, but blockers who have, shorter frames, right? So they got that natural leverage, but also longer arms so they can get inside the torso a little easier. Zion Johnson has that. I think he's around 6'2", right? But he's got 34-inch arms. So this guy's dense, compact, but very strong, very powerful, and the great core strength. I mean, this guy, once he latches on, he can really absorb power and he can nullify rushes just like that. But he's also a mean dude who's able to block at the second level. And he's got tackle guard versatility. So I think if you think that Ryan Bates can start at left guard and you signed Roger Saffold as a veteran at right guard, now I don't think he's going to be a long-term guy. He's probably in the twilight of his career. I think he's in the mid-30s now. So I think you could eventually put Zion Johnson into that starting lineup after him as a successor kind of type deal. But if one of the tackles, Deion Dawkins or Spencer Brown, doesn't pan out, then you can maybe put Zion Johnson out there. I think he has that versatility. And I think that alone can make him worth this pick. I do think if you think Ryan Bates is good enough to kind of fill that role and you want to, stay away from offensive guard in the first round, you could take a corner. The Bills, outside of Tre'Davious White, very thin there. And I think that, looking at guys like Andrew Booth and Derek Stingley, both kind of falling down the board right now. If one of them is still there for you, then I think you have to make that pick because both of those guys are potential blue chip talents. Alongside Trey White would be very, very productive.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too, look, the Buffalo Bills are in kind of a position where, look, you have a very complete roster. You can kind of, at this point, kind of just add in some little additional nuances to the team. Like, they don't have a lot of holes like some of these other teams. So, like, right here at pick number 52 in the second round, you've got them really kind of adding to their already really dominant edge rush after they had, what was his name last year? Gregory Rousseau. Yeah. And then they bring in Von Miller. You've got them getting in, I'm probably going to butcher his name, Kingsley Njabari, edge rusher out of South Carolina. I'm pretty sure I'm close on that. Now, is this for you? Did the move change? Like, when this mock draft was posted, like, do you think they could change this now after bringing in Von Miller, or is this a move where you think it's just bringing as much depth as possible because of how dominant a good pass rush and a good edge rush presence can be in the NFL?
Yeah, I think it's tough, man, because that makes it a very strong rotation. The thing with Enagbare, I think that's his name, Enagbare. So you were close. You weren't quite there, but you were close.
That's as good as I'm going to do. Like, I'm from Indiana. Like, half the time I have a little twang to my voice half the time. So, look, that's as good as you're going to get out of me.
Exactly, man. Hey, it was good enough for sure. But he measured in, it's an interesting pick because one thing that the Bills have always preferred at the edge rusher position, I think, is length, right? So Enagbare coming in, he measured in around 6'4", 258 at the NFL Combine, right? So a little lighter than what he's been at in his college career, but he's got 35-inch arms, around there. I think it's like 34 3/4. So very close to 35 inches. And at the Senior Bowl, we saw, he knows how to use those arms around the apex. He's got great ankle flexion for his size. He doesn't have the best burst, but he's got good enough burst off the line. He can get displacement. And then from there, he's very good at pinching inside and using those 35-inch arms to keep himself clean. Tackles are trying to anchor him and stimmy that rush, but he's very good at, methodically using those hands and that length to pry himself free. I think that, at his peak, he was up to 270 in college. So I do think there's a situation or a scenario where you can use him as a big end opposite Von Miller, who likes to play in space a little bit more. I think there's some, mixing and matching you can do with that combination, or maybe even get him up to 280, put him in a 3-tech occasionally. He's a guy you could potentially move around because he's proven that he can add that weight and keep it on. So I think Kingsley Enagbare, especially with that length and that hand usage, he's a technician, man. And especially with that length, I think he has the talent where you can move him around at his max projection. Right now, though, I mean, we know in the NFL, you can never have too many pass rushers, and this guy's that for sure.
Well, going into round 3, pick number 89 here, adding to a defense that was the best NFL defense last year and also the number 1 scoring defense in the entire NFL, and watching how they played against the New England Patriots, really just stymieing and shutting everything down in that postseason wildcard game. It's hard to imagine them making any more moves here, but the selection here is Matthew Butler, defensive tackle out of Tennessee. And obviously taking a look at the Buffalo Bills depth here on the defensive line, kind of scarce as it is. You have Ed Oliver here, but now you add Matthew Butler to the mix here. What type of move is this? And where do you think he'd be best suited at playing? Is he better suited as a 1 technique, a 3 technique, a 0, head up on the center? Where do you think he best fits?
Yeah, he's a 3 tech for sure, but he can be a very good 3 tech. That's the thing. I think that they signed Daquan Jones, so they got some bolster there, but I do think the rotation, as you mentioned, can be stronger. So I'm all for, especially with Ed Oliver. I'm not sure if he signed a long-term extension yet, so he may be moving on soon. So I think that getting Matthew Butler in that room, this is a guy who he's been one of my favorite sleepers for the entire process. I mean, 6'4", 297 with over 33-inch arms, and then on tape, you look at how this guy plays. He's one of the most explosive defensive tackles in the class. He gets off the line super quickly, and he can really pressure interior offensive linemen with that trait, that explosiveness. Beyond that, great lateral agility as well, can stunt gaps, he's got violent hands too. He uses his length really well, very combative with his movements. And then at the same time, if you have him stunting outside, he's shown ankle flexion where he can kind of bend around the edge too. So a very fun player. I do think there's some room for refinement. Sometimes comes off the line a little bit with his pad level too high. He's got to fix that. But the violent hands, the explosiveness, the power generation, it's all there for this guy. So I think if you want some pass rushing boost on the interior, and that can feed outside to Von Miller, to Kingsley Enagbare, to Gregory Rousseau, it's really a symbiotic relationship on that trench front. And I think if you get him in there, it could really bolster your pass rushing unit. So Matthew Butler, one of my favorite guys in that round 3 range. I really like him.
I think with these 3 picks so far, if you're a Buffalo Bills fan, you're probably going to be feeling pretty good about where you are with your team. But as we know, those 3 picks right there don't always make out the rest of the team. You got to build out the rest of the depths. So looking at the rest of the Buffalo Bills draft right now in round 4, you've got them going with Zion McCollum right here out of Sam Houston State. Then in round 5, adding a little bit of running back depth to the Zach Moss, Devin Singletary range with Kennedy Brooks, running back out of Oklahoma, coming off 3 straight years of over 1,000 yards rushing and what was a very favorable offense outside of last year when Oklahoma took a little bit of a downturn. Round 6, you have Bo Melton, the wide receiver out of Rutgers, a very underrated wide receiver in a very wide receiver-heavy draft class. They're coming back in round 6 again at 202 with Damari Mathis, adding another cornerback, kind of adding in some of that more depth to the position. Then in round 7, Tony Adams, the safety out of Illinois, and rounding things out at pick 144, Austin Dulcus, the offensive tackle out of LSU.
Beautiful right there. Obviously, that's a 7-round Buffalo Bills mock draft. And one thing I always love about drafts, mock drafts anyways, is looking at all the names and trying to figure out how am I going to pronunciate this name this season. Obviously, every single year we've been hit with that. Can't wait to break it down a lot more. But, Ian, thank you so much for your thoughts here on the Buffalo Bills 2022 NFL mock draft.